Tonight I'm going to speak about what we call colloquially honoring your father and mother. But in the Torah and the Ten Commandments, it's kaved es avicha ve'es imecha, which means honor et your father and et your mother. The word et, or es in Hebrew, is an interesting word. It's an amplification word. It's very much an expansion. So it doesn't simply mean honor your father and your mother. It means honor everything of your father and everything of your mother. So there's been a number of questions and conversations about this particular mitzvah in the Torah, which is, again, as I mentioned, in the Ten Commandments. And that begins with the idea that oftentimes when we think of father, we don't think of honor. We say, fear your father and honor your mother. But actually, the rabbis say that the reason we say honor your father is because you don't have to be told to fear your father. He's the presence in your life who punishes, who disciplines, who's supposed to set boundaries and limits. Honoring your father and your mother, everything about your father and your mother, and the word kaved et avicha ve'et imecha may even mean surrogates for your father and your mother, like your teacher, like somebody who is a guardian or a protector. We sometimes in psychology use the word a resource person. So for many people, their father and mother are people who support them and protect them. We want to say, Mommy, Daddy, help me. And when we grow up, we don't always go to our mother or father. We may think of a cousin or a neighbor or even a superhero or an animal, a pet, a lion, something strong, something that has the character of loyalty, something that loves us. Whatever we need, we resource, and that may be included in kaved et avicha ve'et imecha. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Why am I talking about this tonight? Why of all nights? Manishtana halayla hazeh. Because coming up very shortly is the yahrzeit, the anniversary of my parents, my mother and my father's passing. My mother passed away 4 years ago. My father passed away 3 years ago. My mother, Frances Simon, and my father, Albert Simon. May their memories be blessed. And I've learned a lot about what kaved et avicha ve'et imecha means over the last, say, 10 years, more than I knew in my entire life. And what I'm really trying to say is that there's always more time to learn about honoring your parent, even after they're gone, or even if you don't have a relationship with them, or even if you were adopted and you don't know who your parents are. Because within us, the way we're wired, the way we're created, we're relational beings, and we relate to different people differently. The qualities of a father, the qualities of a mother, the qualities of our actual father and the qualities of our actual mother affect us for our whole lives. And they help us set a paradigm, kind of a model in how we relate in all relationships in our lives until we become conscious of that, and then we want to amend them or to modify them in some way, which I hope I'll get to later. Anyway, the first thing about honoring somebody is that you can only honor somebody as much as you honor yourself. So if you don't have much self-respect, the honor you give to somebody else is going to be very small. And if you have a lot of self-respect, if you have dignity, you'll be able to show dignity to others. In my life as an attorney, in my career as an attorney, I was in court almost every day for many, many years. And there's a person in the court they call Your Honor. Is it really her honor or his honor, that person in the black robe? Are we honoring that person? Are we honoring that role? Are we honoring that power? Are we honoring the authority of the state? What are we honoring when we say Your Honor? And of course, as I mentioned, that shows up in us when we stand before a judge or before a parent or before God as a reflection of who we are and how we've developed our personality or character, or how it's been developed in the light of the events of our lives. So I'm kind of speaking on, as I think of this as I go along, but I'm drawn back to the courtroom for a minute. There are people who never had anybody they honored in their life. And when they would stand before the judge, or they called it before the court like the royal court, the word court is from the place in a palace, the place in the place before God, before the king, before the authority. That's what court means. You're standing in the court of justice, of absolute din, of absolute powerlessness. Now that kind of sounds scary, actually, but just so you know, when you walk into court, there's no guarantee you're going to walk out. You walk in and you're subjected to the power of the court. When you're a baby, you are powerless. You are subjected to the power of daddy and mommy. You cannot go anywhere for quite a while, even if you're unhappy, even if you're neglected, even if you're abused. You have no place to turn. You are absolutely in that court. Now, that being said, going to a court, we all sometimes shrink in a court. We subject ourselves to authority. How do we see that with a parent? The idea of honoring your parent is supposed to be a reflection of that, so that when your parent would walk into the room, you might stand up if you're sitting down. Or if you walk into the room and your parent is there, your posture would change. The facial expression would change. Maybe you'd straighten your clothes. Maybe you'd step out and comb your hair, whatever it might be. That would be the natural effect of being in a court before somebody who is greater than yourself. I think that's the idea of honor, that when we recognize that person is greater than us and we show them that respect. But we know that many times it's very difficult to show respect to our parents. And sometimes we just want them out of our lives. Sometimes we never want to speak to them again. Sometimes we resent them. Sometimes we fear them. Sometimes we feel like we've been hurt by them, and we avoid them. Does that mean that they were dangerous or bad or wrong? Maybe at that time, maybe still at this time. Nonetheless, our connection to authority is molded by our relationship with our mother and father. And therefore, the Torah would oblige somebody who is threatened, who is in danger by their mother or father, to not be with them. If the parent needed something, they could send a substitute in. They could send a caretaker in. If the parent was abusive, if the parent was verbally or physically abusive in some way. Let me go on. My mother and father, like most mothers and fathers, wanted to have a family, and they wanted me in their life when I was a baby. But when a baby arrives, other feelings arrive as well. The feeling of maybe, if I'm making this up for the moment, but it's typical of many relationships. It changes the husband-wife relationship. Babies are typically demanding. Not all babies are healthy all the time. Not all babies are smiling in a good mood all the time. I know that. My wife and I have, as they say, Kanai Nahora, 7 kids. And we have, thank God, many grandchildren. So we have experienced and we've observed the challenge of raising children and the toll it takes on us individually and on our relationship. And you weigh that against what it is to the benefits you have from being a mother or father, or in my case, a grandfather. And you pull from in yourself the strength you need to handle that situation. You find the ability to, the dignity, the depth to give, not just materially, but to give care, to model for that child. So how does that child respond when that child is growing, when you've been acting that way towards her or him? Not the same way all the time. Some children feel more connected to their parent. They're more comfortable with their parent. And some children feel uncomfortable with their parent. Maybe their parents feel uncomfortable in their own body, in their own lives. Maybe they've experienced a difficult childhood or trauma in their lives, which affect the way that they can treat a child. It happened in my life. My parents were Holocaust survivors, and as it would turn out, that was very difficult for me growing up as a young child, but it actually happened to be a great benefit for me after I became an adult, because I could learn what it's like to heal from major trauma. I could learn what it is to adapt to life in many positive ways. And I could learn how strong the will to live is, despite massive grief or massive trauma. Now, I'm here not to talk about those stories in particular, but I will tell you a few stories. And one of them, if I ever find it, is well, let's start out here before I go farther. When I grew up, I did not really connect well with my parents. And I was lucky to find a surrogate parent named Rabbi Tesler. And Rabbi Tesler kind of adopted me. Actually, I was adopted way before that. When I think I must have been 2 years old, a year and a half old, when I met my godparents. My godparents were from Holland, Muncie and Eddie Elias. May their memories be blessed. And they were a couple who was 15 years older than my parents. They were childless. And Muncie became friends with my mother here in Los Angeles. And Muncie and Eddie would come and visit my parents once a week, something like that. And they became connected to me. They showed me attention and affection that my parents were unable to show me. That became more and more limited because even when I met them, Eddie had a disability, and his disability got worse over the years. So it made their relationship, it was a challenge it's not like we could go to the park together because Eddie was, the word they used at that time was crippled, but his heart wasn't crippled, his mind wasn't crippled, and the relationship that he and his wife had was magnificent. It was so full of love and so overflowing with affection and mutual respect and mutual love that that I would never even notice that Eddie's body was racked with this terrible situation that he had. Well, anyway, most importantly, I learned a lot about being loved and loving other people in a way that God provided me, because I got a supplemental father and mother right when I was young, and that was for many years. And parallel to that was my parents with their own trauma resonating. So I was kind of living in a parallel world. Later on, I still hadn't worked things out with my parents, but over the course of my life, there were other people who were surrogates for healthy parents for me. And one of them was a teacher I've talked about before, Rabbi Tesler. And Rabbi Tesler, just his physical presence, just the fact that he sat next to me for hours at a time, the fact that he had infinite patience for me, the fact that he wanted to teach me and taught me with no limit, with no limit on time and no limit on love, was a huge healing for me. Let me go a little further, because one of the limitations I had was with my father. When I talk about honoring my father, one of the things that got in the way was I was afraid of my father. My father, whatever he went through in the war, caused him to go into fits of rage. And I experienced him as dangerous, or not dangerous, but violent. Not that he did much damage to me, but emotionally he was racked with anger, rage. And I didn't see that for what it was, which was helplessness, but that's what was there. And therefore I avoided that. I could not face an unpredictable, sad, angry, broken-hearted father. It was too much for me to bear. And there was another layer. There was a layer of expectation from my parents on me, that they wanted me to be successful. And successful for them was like life itself. They weren't aware that I had learning disabilities, that maybe I had ADD, maybe I had some other thing. They didn't diagnose those things in those days, but I couldn't pay attention in school. And I definitely had great difficulties reading and comprehending. And I think I was dyslexic as well. But that was never diagnosed. I got by because I just faked everything. I memorized everything I needed to do. I wasn't able to take cohesive notes. And on the night before any test, I would steel myself to get somebody to help me review it, and then I would, again, fake it. And that's how I lived until I met Rabbi Tessler. And he spent day after day after day reading with me, studying with me, learning with me, being patient with my shortcomings. And through and this is while I'm a lawyer going to court. I know it's hard to believe, but from end of 1980 until 2006, I learned with him almost every day. And during that time, not only did my ability to learn clear up and my depth of understanding was greater, but my depth of trust was greater because I was with him. But yet I was still unable to break through with my father. There was a man that I knew, I was friends with, and one day he was talking about the difficulties. He had similar difficulties with his father, and he was bemoaning the difficulty of feeling trust in his father's presence, of feeling comfortable, of feeling safe in his father's presence. And as we were talking about it, it occurred to me that safety was something that my father didn't own. It was my assessment of what's safe or what's comfortable. And if I wanted to go in there and say it's going to be okay, I'm okay, whatever they say is going to be what they say, and whatever I have and whatever I feel is going to be what I have, say, and feel. So I left my friend's house and I drove over to my parents' house that day. And that must have been about 14 years ago, 13 years ago. I don't remember, something like that. And I walked into my parents' house and I immediately was confronted with the old feelings of discomfort, of anxiety, of worrying that they're going to ask me, did I make money? How am I doing? Maybe my hair wasn't combed the way they like. Anything that kind of detracted from whatever aura of success they wanted me to have, that they needed me to have, maybe for their own safety, maybe for their own feeling that that's the only way I would be safe. But I went in there and I said, I am okay the way I am. And when they asked me those questions, I don't remember what I said, but if they said, did you make money this week? I might say yes, and then leave it at that. And then without reacting or resisting or being afraid, I would be able to be present with my father in particular, and my mother. And that was the beginning of what I would call the period of Kivud Av V'Em, that I began to experience with my parents. And that was about 14 years ago. So we went from there. Little by little, I trusted myself. I believed in that I didn't need to have what they thought I needed to be okay. I didn't need to be able to talk about money or to say how much I made or to, look a certain way. And I was totally okay with it. And the more I was okay with it, the more I succeeded. The more I was okay with myself, the more objective success I had in the world, in relationships, in court, with people, in business, and in terms of making money as well. So once I let go of the fear of not being who I should be, and I became who I was, the bracha began to flow. And my relation with my parents was more on an even keel. More I could see them for who they were, and the more they could let go of their fear of me failing, their fear of me disintegrating somehow. So the situation that I talk about is that we all need to have COVID es avicha ve'esimecha, even if we don't have parents, even if our father and mother aren't here. How do we do that if our father and mother is not here? How do we do that? We are actually surrogates for our parents. The dignity that we carry is a reflection on their memory. The improvements that we do to our soul through learning Torah, through being a decent person, through always working on refining and elevating ourselves and telling the truth and being a truthful person, is a continuation of Kivud Av V'Em. I want to thank my wife, Esther, for modeling Kivud Av V'Em for me. You need a teacher sometimes, and she's the best teacher. She really gave huge respect, honor, love, dignity, care, affection to both my mother and father in spades, and which I wasn't able to do for many, many years. But slowly but surely, I no longer needed her to do that for me. I was able to show up more and more. And particularly at the end of my parents' lives, which again was just a few years ago, I had an intimacy with my parents, and there was trust, and there was love, and there was, even in their hardest times, they let me in, and I was able to comfort them and listen to them and support them and be with them in their fears and difficulties, dealing with their difficult memories, and just absolutely knowing that they had a son and sons and, daughter-in-laws and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who reflected their success, that they had succeeded. So Kivud Av V'Em is a complex subject. And as I mentioned, it's not just honoring your parent, it's honoring everything about your parent, which includes a lot of things about us. We're included in that Kaved et avicha ve'et imecha, the and father and mother is me and mother, me and father, me, the attitudes I bring, the behavior I show, the love I muster and sculpt in my own heart and mind. And like I say, that goes on. It goes on. And for my own children, which if you are watching or listening to what I'm saying, I love you very much. And I have, from before you were born, loved you. Before I was even married, I developed my life to bring you in, to create a place for you to come into the world. And if you knew that, there would be more of a place for kivud avim for you too. So I'm telling you, you probably know it. I'm sure you are very grateful for everything. But as now you are all parents, or some of you will be parents soon, God willing, know that kivud avim is an amplification of your soul. It's a way to come close to Hashem. It's a way to demonstrate the greatness of your existence in the world. And it does, and even without a father and mother, or father or mother, even if you were adopted, there are people who are surrogates. There are people who love us, and we can develop that same quality with them. Thank you for joining me tonight. And if you have any questions, please ask me privately. And thank you.